Hello, I'm Tarik Toros. Welcome to What's Happening in Turkey. Trump closed the case. What will Erdoğan give back? In Erdoğan's Turkey, the sense of who is seen as a threat is no longer aimed only at politicians. Pressure on the main opposition party is expanding to major business groups, leading figures in the business world, and even comedians, musicians, and social media personalities. Comedian Tuba Ulu had a section in her stand-up show about dating and relationships. In one of her jokes, mocking today's casual relationships, she said, "At first, Sultan Süleyman the Magnificent was only seeing Hürrem for a one-night thing. Then she pushed for marriage and ended up ruling the world." Some people in the audience laughed along, but the authorities in Turkey did not see it the same way. After one of her performances in Istanbul, she was detained and held for days. In May, prosecutors filed charges accusing her of inciting hatred and hostility among the public, and sought a prison sentence of up to 3 years. Erdoğan's policy of pressure no longer appears to be limited to politicians and journalists. Influencers and celebrities are increasingly being treated as actors with political influence. Compared with the past, the state is leaving less room for public figures to remain ambiguous or neutral. And it is doing so through law enforcement and the courts. Meanwhile, the European Parliament's latest report on Turkey paints a picture of a country marked by a long list of concerns over democratic standards, judicial independence, and fundamental rights. Let's begin. First time, EU calls for sanctions on a Turkish official. According to the European Parliament's Turkey report adopted on 17th of June 2026, the judiciary in Turkey is neither independent nor impartial, and double standards are being applied in certain cases. The report argues that the opposition is being weakened through judicial means and that Erdoğan's potential political rivals are being pushed out of the system. It also states that CHP leader Özgür Özel's administration was removed from office through political intervention. The CHP, founded by Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, in Turkey's main opposition party and the founding party of the Turkish Republic. The report highlights that rulings by the European Court of Human Rights are not being implemented, and that a stronger shift towards religion-based references is becoming visible across education, cultural life, political discourse, and the media. According to the report, Turkey is also showing no political will to revive its long-stalled European Union accession process. One of the most striking sections of the report concerns Turkey's Justice Minister Akın Gürlek. The European Parliament called for Akın Gürlek to be placed on the EU sanctions list. In practical terms, that would mean a travel ban to the European Union and the freezing of any assets held within EU jurisdictions. That recommendation was included in the report and adopted. But it is important to underline this. The decision is not binding, it is advisory in nature. Even so, it carries significant political and symbolic weight. Because for the first time, the European Parliament has formally called for sanctions against a serving Turkish government official. For that reason, even if it produces no direct outcome, it is being seen as a notable threshold moment, one that reflects how Brussels views the debate around the rule of law and the judiciary in Turkey. No fine, no conviction. What did Erdoğan offer? One of the week's most politically significant decisions also came from the United States. The U.S. District Court for the Southern District of New York closed the criminal case against Halkbank after nearly 9 years of legal proceedings in the United States. The court accepted a joint request submitted by Halkbank and the U.S. Department of Justice and dismissed the indictment. The case, originally filed in 2019, was based on allegations that Halkbank, a state-owned Turkish bank, helped evade U.S. sanctions on Iran and facilitated the movement of roughly $20 billion in restricted funds. The allegations were backed by documents, and U.S. authorities had pointed to what they describe as substantial evidence. Within that framework, U.S. prosecutors accused Halkbank of helping to circumvent sanctions on Iran, bank fraud, participating in money laundering activities, helping move billions of dollars in restricted Iranian funds through the international financial system. According to the allegations, the scheme involved money transfer companies, front organizations, and international financial channels. The Turkish side of this story first came into public view on 17th of December 2013. That date refers to a major corruption investigation targeting senior government figures, an individual close to Erdoğan's administration, as the money transfers and network of relationships appeared to reach for cabinet ministers. Then Prime Minister Erdoğan intervened in the judicial process. Prosecutors and police officers involved in the investigation became targets, and the case in Turkey was shut down. The central figure in the process, Turkish-Iranian businessman Reza Zarrab, was arrested in the United States in 2016, and the case was effectively reopened there. During court proceedings in 2017, Zarrab described how the system operated while cooperating under witness protection arrangements. The formal criminal case against Halkbank in the United States was filed on 15th of October 2019. For Erdoğan, who closed the case in Turkey, Halkbank remained one of the most important topics in discussions with U.S. officials for nearly 9 years. After that, technical legal proceedings continued. For a long time, the case never fully moved into the substantive trial phase. Following Trump's return to the presidency for a second term, Erdoğan was prepared to see the case closed, even if that meant paying compensation. But it appears he may have secured more than he expected. Halkbank did not admit wrongdoing. It did not pay a financial penalty. There was no conviction. At the same time, restrictions on transactions benefiting Iran and sanctions compliance oversight will continue. Trump, who has made notably positive remarks about Erdoğan since returning to office for a second term, has not made this political gesture without expecting something in return. And judging by the timing, we may not have to wait long to see what that return might be. I am Tarik Toros. You've been watching What's Happening in Turkey. See you next week.